Greetings, beautiful friends. My name is David McLeod, and I am your life mastery coach, author of the fabulous little book, A Life to Die For, and one of the co-authors of the series, the best-selling series, The Wellness Universe Guide to Complete Self-Care. I welcome here to Life Mastery TV, which I call your source for inspiration, empowerment, and fulfillment. Today, we are going to be doing episode number 217, and our title today is Finding Inspiration After Loss. Now, here's something that I know. Everyone goes through some form of loss at one time or another. In fact, most of us go through many different losses throughout our lives. Think about it. We lose time, we lose money, we lose jobs, and the list of possible losses is endless. And every loss that we have is accompanied by its own kind of discomfort or pain, depending on the nature of our attachment to whatever it is that we lost. But nothing, I don't think, can compare to the loss of a loved one, a friend, a parent, a spouse, or a child. Now, I think most of us may have experienced that from time to time. Usually it's in the form of a loss of a parent or a grandparent or something like that. But sooner or later, we also have a loss of a friend or a child, so heaven forbid, or a wife or a husband. And this is the kind of loss that can bring about the most intense sort of emotional pain, something that really, I think, has to be experienced in order to be fully understood. If you experience extreme loss of this type, it may seem to you that grief and sorrow will never end, that it will become a part of you and maybe even consume you. You may find it so intense that it stops you in your tracks, impeding every step, crushing you to the point where you begin to fear that you won't be able to take another breath. Well, the truth is, you can take that breath. And soon enough, you can take another step. After a while, you may find that even though you may think about that lost person constantly, the intensity of the pain starts to subside, and sooner or later, you return to a state that you classify as some kind of normal. Well, although normal is a great place to get to, here at Life Mastery TV, we are more interested in finding ways to live extraordinary lives. So when the universe throws extremely difficult curveballs in our direction, we choose to remember that we have many resources available to help us deal with them, which is precisely why I've invited the amazing Rachel Vasquez to come and join me today on this program. As a proud mother of 4 who lost her husband and best friend of 23 years after a catastrophic motorcycle accident, Rachel began an intense process of self-discovery, and she now helps other people to create an inspired life after loss. Pardon me. While she focuses mainly on how this kind of loss affects widows, what she has to share today can be of help to anyone who is struggling with loss. So please join me in welcoming Rachel Vasquez to today's program. Welcome, Rachel. I know I can hear you.
Hi, thank you so much. Hello, everyone.
There you are. So glad you could join me today.
Thank you. The honor is completely mine. This is a passion conversation for me. Hello, Anna. Hello, Angelica. It is Linda. It is a beautiful conversation to have because it's one that people tend to run away from. And so I love to bring it to the forefront of every conversation.
Well, beautiful. And I'm glad you're here. Before we continue, I just want to invite folks. I don't know what your individual experience is here. I'm glad you're here on the live program. Please be willing to share your thoughts or your questions or anything like that in the chat, and we'll do our best to respond to that as we proceed. So, Rachel, this story of this motorcycle accident that cost you your husband, I know it's been quite a journey for you to get where you are now, but would you like to share with us a little bit about what happened there so we can understand the intensity of your loss and what it's meant for your life?
Yeah, absolutely. My husband was also my best friend since we were in our early 20s. And I had a marriage prior and it ended in divorce. It was about 5 minutes. I always write it up to being young and dumb. So I do have a daughter from that marriage. And so my husband stepped in and was a fantastic bonus dad. Everyone loved him, and he was like just this big, huge teddy bear of a man. And we were at the mall eating lunch and enjoying each other's company. We were planning a vacation, and we had some other things going on, as you know, all married couples do, that we were working on, and we were planning a move and things like that. He went ahead, and in Arizona, where we were living at the time, the weather's beautiful. So he was on his motorcycle, even though this was right at the Thanksgiving Day weekend. And we had purchased some things for the angel giving tree. And we decided we were going to go ahead and go our separate ways. I needed to pick up one of our daughters that was shopping with her friends. And we were going to meet up later that evening to move some motorcycles into the new house that we had just rented. And my husband is one who always gets distracted helping people or talking to people. So when I hadn't heard from him after a significant amount of time, I started to get worried. And I then received a phone call from his father that he had been in an accident and we needed to meet at the hospital. He was hit by an underage driver who was under the influence. And the underage driver left the scene of the accident. Paramedics and supportive services were called in by bystanders. And from that is like the opening credits of the movie that is my life. From that moment on, I felt like I separated from my body, and I was on an autopilot situation of doctors talking to me, decisions being made, trying to gather my family. My stepmother was vacationing with her family down in Mexico, and I have family. My mother and my stepfather lived out of state, and his mother lived out of state as well. So, you know, we're trying to get everyone. And at that moment, I really felt in my soul that he was not with us, that everything that they were doing at that point in time were just like life-saving measures and keeping his physical body alive and supported. Mm-hmm. So a week later, they did remove him from those devices and he passed away. That set off a hell like very few no one should ever experience it. And very few people have had that experience, but that's what I thought at the time.
Right. Later
on, as I kind of found my tribe, I realized I am not alone. And this mm-hmm. is a huge underserved community of the widowed, both male and female, have no resources to help you. And it was just a devastating time. I mean, really, it was awful.
Right. Well, first of all, I want to say I can't imagine what it's like to lose a loved one, someone you're very close to like that. And so it's hard for me to express what's in my heart at the moment. But I know what it's like to lose a friend. I know what it's like to lose a parent. I can relate on some level to some of the pain that you might have experienced. And I think I tried to allude to that a little bit in my introduction. So here's something that I would like you to talk about. A lot of people, when they hear about someone, a friend, let's say, has lost a loved one, haven't got a clue what to say to them. And so they end up putting their foot in their mouth and they say something real stupid like, well, you know, life goes on, or some stupid thing like that. And it obviously statements like that don't help. I think, well, speaking only for myself, the only thing I can say is, you know, I'm so sorry for your loss. And if there's anything I can do to support you, please let me know. That's really all I could think to say to anybody. And I'd like to know how it feels for you when you get responses like that from people, or what would be the ideal thing for someone to say? Can you imagine?
Wow. Okay. So I love that question, and it makes me think of kind of it's a two-part answer to that question. The first thing is all honesty. It doesn't matter what you say. It all sounds like a bunch of malarkey, and I don't want to hear it. And I want to put my fingers in my ears and go la la la. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I know, I know. Because it's it's just the way the grief is wrapping you up. It's twisting you up inside, and there's really not any right thing to say. But with that being said, if you say nothing, then it's like, what's his problem? Why hasn't he addressed the fact that I am dying inside and nobody's saying anything to me? So what you say is actually, it's a beautiful thing. I also like when people just say, oh my God, Rachel, that is terrible. I don't know what to say. I am so sorry that you're going through this pain, this loss, this sucks. Whatever, if they want to curse about it, really just saying, hey, it's a connection of acknowledgement of this is horrible.
Right.
And I think when it comes to acknowledging a catastrophic loss, and that being, your spouse, partner, a child, a parent, the pain is so great, and people want to shut that down. Others don't. They feel uncomfortable. It's a space, because when people say I can't even imagine, and that's not the case. The problem is that they can imagine and they don't want to go there. So they try to make you feel better by telling you things like it was his time, or God has a plan, or all of the cliche remarks. And the fact is I know those things come from a place of love and discomfort. But in the moment that people are grieving, they don't take that time out to say, I know you mean well. I know you're coming from a place of dis-ease, and you're not really knowing what to say to me. So you're coming off a little awkward. You're just thinking, wow, really? Okay, sure. And you just want to scream.
Yeah, I think that, when something like this happens to a friend, I think that the thing to remember is we're still friends. I'm your friend. I really don't know for sure what you're going through. I can tell that it's painful for you, and I want to be here for you. So please just let me know what you need. I think I don't want to pretend that I know what you're going through. I wouldn't even want to say that must be awful, because maybe for you it was a huge relief. I don't know. So I want to be really, really careful with the words I choose, and just to let you know I'm here to support you, whatever kind of whatever things you might need support for. I think that's really the most important side of it. Like you said, it's the connection piece, remembering that we are friends, we love each other, so let's support each other the best way we can.
I think too, the important thing for people to really remember is the words that you say do matter. So when you say, I'm here for you, and if you need anything, just let me know. There's two things to remember with those statements. One, the person who's grieving hears that, and they are holding you to that accountability. However, sure, it's also hard for them to reach out, and no matter how much they say, I'm fine, going through the automatic email reply messages, I'm doing okay, it's hard, one day at a time, blah, blah, blah. Inside, they're still not okay. So even if that is you showing up by a text message, a little emoji, or, just saying, I'm thinking of you, I'm here, or, hey, can I send you DoorDash for some food? Or can I bring you a casserole or whatever? You don't have to be there every single minute, but don't give up on them, because we will push you away. And it's just part of the nature of you're tired, you're hurt, you're trying to deal with a million things that people can't even fathom until they are in the middle of dealing with these million things. And it becomes overwhelming. And when people stop showing up, Or say for my husband, we had a celebration of life. We had discussed that so many times of if I pass away or, if you do, what we wanted. And so we had a taco truck and we had beers and we had music, all of his favorite songs. And so everyone is so full of good intention, earnest intention, but then everyone goes away and you don't hear from 95% of those people that were offering whatever. I'm going to come cook for you. I'm going to come pick up the kids and take them to the zoo. I'm going to do, insert whatever. And you never hear from them again. I mean, 4.5 years out at this point, and I can't tell you who was even there, because that's another thing that happens to widows. But I do remember the words that were spoken to me. And I also am very aware of the people who have not shown up, not just for me, but especially for our children. And for those things, I have to work through some of that frustration and anger.
Yeah, I totally get it. I totally get it. Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the challenge that we're talking about here. A lot of people don't like to be in the presence of extreme emotion, and because they get uncomfortable, they don't know how to deal with it. And what I have learned is I don't have to do anything. If I'm just there and you're having whatever experience you're having and some kind of an emotional thing that some people might label as a meltdown or whatever, I can just be there and support you in that meltdown silently and just spiritually without saying a word. And that might be all the support you need. And what happens is if I am there, then you can be empowered. You can empower yourself to ask for some support if you want it in that moment. That's part of what we forget, just because someone's in grief or in pain or whatever doesn't mean they're completely disempowered. And we shouldn't treat them like victims. We shouldn't treat them like they're incapacitated. I think we should try to do our best to say, yeah, go ahead, experience what you're experiencing. I'm feeling some of that pain here right now, but I'm sure it's not the same as you. I might even have some tears in the process, But I think one thing that we tend to do is we get uncomfortable. And so what do? We reach out to try to give you comfort, which may not be the thing you actually want in that moment. Even handing you a box of Kleenex might trigger you into something else. Or reaching out and trying to hug you and trying to say, oh, there, don't cry. Come on, what is up with that? Let's not do that kind of thing. Let the person have his or her emotional process and just be present for it. That's what I would recommend.
Absolutely. And everything you said, even, like offering the box of tissue, trying to give the hug, sometimes that can be ill received. And it's very important to understand that it's not personal to you.
Of course.
There's a lot of emotions that are racing around. Some people experience a lot of anger. Some people extreme grief. A lot of people don't know what it is that they're feeling. Confusion, complete disorientation. They have just had their whole world rocked. There is a survey that was done several decades ago, and it's the Holmes and Reyes survey. And what that did was it took around just under 50 losses, and they rated those losses on a scale of 1 to 100. And when you got to a certain amount, and I don't even want to give the amount because I don't want to misquote, but when you got to a certain amount, the scientific realization there is that amount of grief that comes from these losses is when it will start to have significant possible permanent effects on your health.
Sure.
So this survey did not, and I'm just saying this as a caveat because I always have a lot of people that jump in with this. It does not speak to the loss of a child. I don't think that they use that as the equation because that's not as common as other losses.
Right.
With that being said, these are things like financial ruin, divorce, loss of intimacy, bankruptcy, retirement, all different types of stressors and where those fit in. Because even though something like retirement can be a great thing, there is a huge level of stress. You have to rearrange your finances. What are you going to do? That type of thing.
Exactly.
Becoming widowed is the only event in that study that raised a full 100 points. And from that, it didn't even account for the secondary losses that come in from this. And I am a community advocate in my state for the Modern Widows Club. So there are a wealth of information and where I have learned so much of why I feel the way I do and what is going on in society, not only locally in the US, but globally, and why those things matter so much. So when you're talking about all of these losses, these are things that are widows' health is being affected. So they may not feel well. They're not sleeping. They're not eating. They're very unhealthy. They're probably going into, a lot of them will start eating their feelings. I had 100-pound weight gain that I have, been since working on. A lot will start drinking or turn to drugs in order as coping mechanisms. So it's a very unstable, volatile time in a person's life when you're dealing with such a huge loss. And so when people who are coming close trying to support them, they may not just be being pushed away because of the grief, but because, hey, I don't want him to know that I'm not okay. Everyone's trying to say I'm okay because everyone's telling me, go back to work, go back to church, do all the things that you used to do, get right back on that horse. You should start dating again. You should, you guys can have more children. All the things that people tell people because they're trying to soothe the baby, so to speak, of shh, 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 there. It's
Exactly
okay.
right.
Moving on, have a lollipop,
Right.
and it doesn't work that way.
Right. So you've mentioned a few things that I think are very important. First of all, this idea of stress. I think that's extremely important for people to understand. When any kind of an event like this happens, it increases the level of stress, and therefore the cortisol in your body and various other chemical imbalances that start to come about. And I find it interesting that you mentioned that some of the things that we do to try and cope with this stress, things like drinking alcohol or doing drugs or eating food or whatever it is we do, ironically, and people don't necessarily realize this right away, they simply add to the stress, even though they might give you a temporary relief from the original stress. So you got to be really, really careful about that. And so you got to find something that will reduce the level of that stress. And there's lots of different things that we could talk about. Prayer and meditation, I think, are going to be two of the big ones for people to help them to reduce the level of stress. I try to avoid any kind of medication if possible, because that can just make other things more complicated. But at the same time, you don't want to stop doing whatever you've been doing in the past. Like if you're on some kind of medication, just because a bad event happens, you don't want to stop doing that. So we have to really be very, very careful about the actions that we take. And so I just wanted to bring that up. The other point that I wanted to make, you mentioned this process of becoming widowed. Now that implies a gender aspect to this, and I want to get some clarification here. I imagine that there's a big difference between becoming a female widow who has lost a husband versus becoming a male widower who has lost a wife. I'm sure that there's a lot of common things there, absolutely. But tell me a little bit about your perspective on how they differ.
Oh, that is such a good question. So when I speak, I do speak a lot to the widowed women, and that's mainly because I am one. And the fact is that 70% of married women will become a widow in their lifetime, and the percentage of men is just over 20%. So there's just a larger population when people speak about the widowed.
Sure.
The men tend to be married again more quickly than the women. Men have the connection and crave the, and I'm not speaking for all of men, I'm just saying statistically speaking, that they crave to be in that bonded relationship, kind of that nurtured relationship. And this is going to speaking, and I just want to make it clear, is it doesn't matter who, if you are gay, straight, bisexual, whatever your sexual orientation is, it's the loss of a partner. And I think that you're going to see kind of like more of a blend of the widowers versus the widowed as those statistics start becoming more available. But the loss is still the same. So you do have men tend to die earlier than women. So you see women who are second and third time widows if they go out and they remarry and then it happens again. Men have a higher rate of or a higher mortality rate than women do. So that is why there's so much more research done coming from the widow angle than there are men, just because there's so many more of us. 2,800 women in the United States are widowed every single day. So that's over 1 million widows a year. So that's
2,800 a day.
2,800 a day, over 1 million a year. And when you think about that for a moment, to know that of that, there is 48% of those widowed women have children that are still living in the home. So I had one child who was old enough to be living on her own, and then 3 still in the home. And
I'm going to just put that into perspective here. 2,800 a day. Take the number of hours in a day, 24, and divide that into 2,800. How many does that give you? Almost 100 per hour. Think about that.
And those
100 women.
COVID, yes.
Yeah, slightly more than that, actually. 100 women every hour becoming widowed. That's really a staggering number when you think about it. We can break that down into minutes and seconds too if you want, but that's a staggering number, and something that I certainly never heard those numbers before. So I'm grateful that you brought it, and so there's something here that we're not necessarily aware of, and we need to raise our awareness about it. And in fact, I would suspect that awareness is one of the key elements of dealing with the grief and the loss in the first place. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. Carolyn Moore, who is the founder of the modernwidowsclub.org, she started that as in her living room with just 2 other people in Florida. About 13 years ago I think, but Modern Widows has been in for 11 years now. But the reason she even got started was she went into the yellow pages and, widow support. There's not a Google search engine back then, and widow support, widow this, widow that, nothing existed to help women through this horrible period of their life when everything has completely crumbled. And when I say crumbled, people probably don't think about it in this perspective. Everything in your life changes when you lose, whether you're a man or a woman, you lose a spouse or partner. Everything from the way that you grocery shop. You're no longer buying their favorite food items. You're no longer cooking the same things that you used to cook. You're cooking no longer for that extra person. So if you didn't have children at home, now you're cooking for yourself only. And that's where a lot of bad eating habits come in, because you just can't even go to the grocery store. So everything from the way that you shop, do your laundry, there's no longer their clothes. You're not putting their clothes away in the drawers. There's no longer 2 toothbrushes sitting on your sink anymore. It's right. Every single thing is a reminder that you are now alone. Your person, your confidant, is completely plucked out of your life. And I had a health scare with one of my children yesterday, for example, and I'm sitting in the emergency room and they're running all of these heart tests. And, my person wasn't there. Her dad wasn't there. and we're sitting here trying to understand information. And I have a teenage son who I had just picked up from school, and he's sitting in the car, and he needs food, he needs this and that. And I'm all by myself in the emergency room, scared for what's going on, but still needing to manage other things, and not having a person who has as much invested emotionally standing by my side, and I think that that's another place where you just really feel that disconnect, because even if I had my parents or friends, it's not the same thing as having that person, your person, standing there supporting you when you're when you're going through other things that life is throwing at you. That life happens all the time around you, regardless. So,
Right.
It
Right. I can see where, yeah, you're probably in for some big surprises that you hadn't even thought about before when something like this happens. And as you say, I mean, I didn't even think about the toothbrush thing, for example. But yeah, you're right. The moment this happens, that toothbrush might still be there for a while. You're probably not going to remove it right away, but it's going to be there. And when you see it, you're going to say, it's just another reminder. A toothbrush can trigger, a whole slew of emotions. And it's not like there's anything wrong with any of those emotions. They're going to happen. And this is the point that I think we're talking about in this awareness side of it, is just being aware that these things can and will happen, and then being open to accepting them when they do happen, and not try to push them away or prevent them from showing up in your life, because it's part of the healing process. It's part of the overall experience. You agree with that?
Absolutely.
Thank you for sharing the depth, says Anna. Well, you're welcome, Anna.
Absolutely. I think too is that everybody assumes that people are going on, and women mask. I mean, we are born into this world feeling like we need to mask and everything is okay, and you're trying to keep up in the business world and trying to stay on top of taking care of the kids and keeping up with the Joneses and having the bigger, better Christmas lights up on your house, and I'm joking about that, but just saying that we wear a lot of masks, and so we're busy trying to say, okay, I've got this. I can build a business, and I can take care of my children and handle the doctor's appointments and go to the school meetings and talk about this and talk about that and be a good daughter and be a good friend. And you're juggling. You've got a lot of balls up in the air. And the hardest thing is when you have to stop for a minute and you're alone with yourself and you're realizing that there's other stuff that's going on in the world, and that you're trying really hard to keep everything together and put on that brave face and understand that I need some help. Where do I go to find these things? And then there's nothing. There's no resources. When you're doing your taxes, you can only file as a qualifying widow for 2 years. And then what comes in, boom, you're now married filing single. So now you have so much more of your income is going out towards taxes that, you've lost half of your income. If you were a 2-income family, you've lost your income. Your whole retirement portfolio has changed. And not to mention the fact, if you happen to be a woman whose secondary education was put on hold to raise a family and to be in that space, and now you have to re-enter the workforce, that has completely changed. Where now, you need to have your bachelor's degree in order to work in a call center. So the cost of living is rising. A lot of women have lost their health insurance because if their health insurance was under their spouse's job position. And if you are one of the widows who are raising your children, 49% of those kids, their education and their knowledge drops. So now you're dealing with this other level of trying to raise beautiful, intelligent human beings while you're still holding on and grasping at straws. So there's just not a lot of awareness around how your health is impacted and what you're dealing with on the inside. And I think that's the hardest thing, is that there's no awareness around everything that is encompassed, because it is a huge bubble of different things that are popping constantly, and you're just trying to make it all while you're in deep grief.
Right. Which, of course, explains why you might be going through an emotional roller coaster. You have the ups and downs, and probably it would seem like more downs than ups when you're going through this, and then to have all that additional stress put onto you from external sources. I did not realize that you still had to file your IRS report as a married filing single. I didn't. That's obviously different from being divorced, because now when you're divorced, you're just a single filing single. So that I don't know what that means in terms of the costs and everything, but I imagine that can be very frustrating.
Yeah, I may have misspoke. Okay, so there's a qualifying widow that you get for the first 2 tax
Right.
years.
Yeah.
My husband passed in December, and so that was one. And then the second year, came and went, and then after that, it's now I'm a single person, and those tax.
Okay.
That's what I meant.
I
Yes,
see. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
And
So maybe I just misunderstood what you were saying, but even so, we don't really need to know the details of your tax returns. I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding, some of the external stresses that are coming, and how challenging they can be when you always had a partner to help you. Well, not always, but for quite a long time, you had a partner to help you with all of that. So now that support is gone, and you're on your own in that regard. Plus, you still got your kids to deal with, and how old are your kids anyway? They're teenagers, right?
Now they're teenagers. I have my oldest daughter is in her 20s, but then I have, now 19, 17, and 15. My 15-year-old is extremely brilliant and high functioning, autistic. So he's a little socially awkward. So, that puts a little bit more time and effort into things like when it comes to schooling and
Right.
a lot of meetings with the teachers. But, that's it. You have to be this advocate. And I've always kind of been a passive person when it came to teachers and doctors. And my husband was the one who would say, now, wait a minute, and he was the loud advocate. And so I have had to learn how to step into that role in that space of going, whoa, time out, guys. These tests need to be done, and this is not right, or this is not. And that has, it's definitely a huge growing experience through this. And I think that is actually, if I had one thing to really drive home through this conversation, is as a widow, or once you lose your partner, there is not anything of you that is the same. You are not the same person, is what I mean. You have, you're changing at a fundamental level. And you don't really know where you are as a single person, because before, your lives were so blended. I would watch football on Sundays and eat hot wings and beers at the bar and throw some darts. And I haven't done that since. So I was like, was that his thing this whole time? Or because
Right.
I don't know, it's okay. It wasn't something I feel like doing right now. So all of these things are coming at you, and you have to rediscover everything about who you are, because you're not even the same age you were when you first met,
Of course, right. So you went through a kind of, well, for want of a better term, a kind of an identity crisis then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's
Right.
part of those secondary losses, because your identity, you're a married couple, where's James and Rachel? Are James and Rachel coming? I hope James and Rachel bring that special dessert. Is James and Rachel making that chocolate cake? Well, James is gone. So I'm missing half the ingredients to the James and Rachel. So now it's just Rachel showing up. And how am I going to show up? I don't even know. I probably won't show up, because everyone's going to look at me like, oh, how are you doing? And out of the place of love and compassion for me. But it is something that you start to be hyper aware of, is that the whole energy of a room changes when you walk in and they're like, oh, the widowed woman.
All right. Well, so I'm going to put the question right back to you then, Rachel. If I invite you to a party, how are you going to show up?
Now having some space from that grief, and I've learned how to manage it, and I've been growing around that grief because that's still there, that doesn't change. What I have grown and learned is to feel very empowered and inspired, and to continue to learn a relationship of myself and why that's so important. So when I'm showing up at your party, I'm walking in as being a widow is one component. It is something that happened to me. I lost my best friend. I lost the father of my children. Yes, that is something horrible that happened, but I'm here. I'm the grief warrior. I advocate for women's health, for widows. I am happy, fun, exciting. And if I am talking about my work, it doesn't mean to bring everybody down. It's always like, oh, what do you do? I work at the grocery store. Oh, I'm in sales. I'm a pharmaceutical rep. What do you do? Oh, I'm a widow's empowerment coach. I work to educate and find resources for widows. And immediately it changes to, oh, wow, and although I feel kind of like, yeah, oh, wow, that's right, because it's so empowering and it's so special. But it's not something to be pitied. It's absolutely something to be celebrated, because I am not using it as an identity like, oh, aren't you afraid of, everybody knowing, oh, you're a widow. You're just staying in that widow space. And it's like, no, I embraced a calling for to be the spotlighter on a situation and on a demographic of people, men and women alike, that is so underserved in every community worldwide. I mean, the United States is the third largest widow community, just underneath China and India. So that's huge.
So are you open to a little feedback here?
I am.
So I think I've known you now for maybe a year.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when I met you, I didn't know anything about James. I don't know anything about your past husband. I know, and today, in fact, I'm really learning a lot more about you. But I'd like to just say that my impression of you, even in that short time that I've known you, has always been of a woman who is standing in her own power, of a woman who's not afraid to speak her mind, of a woman who knows the truth of who she is. So when you talk about identity crisis, I actually find it hard to buy that, because you seem so centered and grounded in who you really are. That's just my opinion. And maybe you don't feel it that way yourself because of, maybe you're still feeling some of that other stuff. But that's what I see. And I'm not trying to take away from your experience. Please don't get me wrong. I'm just saying, I think whatever you are doing, my invitation is to keep doing it, because it's pretty amazing. That's what I say. That's just my opinion.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, because it's taken a lot of work to get there. And a lot of the things that have put me to where I am now, and even a year ago when I met you, the momentum that keeps continuously building has taken an extreme amount of work. Because if my children were sitting here, or my parents were sitting here, they would say, let me tell you about what she was really like back in the day.
Yeah, but you know what? I'm sorry. I'm not going to buy it. I'm not going to buy it, because you wouldn't have been able to get where you are today if you didn't have those qualities within you 23 years ago.
Yeah.
All right? Those qualities are there. They're part of who you are. And as awful and as unpleasant and as horrible as this experience was, it gave you the opportunity to really bring those qualities forth in a way that might not have happened any other way. So, yeah, your kids are going to say, yeah, you should have seen my mom last week when blah, blah, blah. I'm sure they've got all kinds of stories to tell. But I bet you they will agree with my assessment right now.
Yeah. You have that fire within you, but I think what happens for a lot, and I'm not going to say most, and I'm not going to say all, but there's a percentage of women and men, because I've had the privilege of connecting with a lot of widowed men, and and what it is it's like a spirituality shift that happened for me personally, and I'm only going to speak from my personal experience. I used to be very involved in church and things like that. There was not a lot of support there. In fact, there are statistics for that, but I don't know what they are. But I never felt like angry or mad at God or anything like that. Was not my understanding or my feelings, but I did feel very confused and alone, and I did go on a spiritual journey, and through that, things started to become more in focus. And as I continued on with doing like a lot of my energy work and a lot of my journaling and the things that I teach other women to do now, and other grievers that I work with now, as I teach those tools and pass those things on to them, things started to become more and more clear. And I guess I can only say that it's like being in the middle of a raging forest fire, and everything is burnt completely down and the earth is scorched, but then something beautiful starts to grow, and the woodland creatures start to come back, and the trees begin to grow, and the flowers start to bloom, and everything starts to open up in beautiful ways, if that's your perspective, and you go searching and you build upon that aspect and use those things to honor. Like every day I have a mental conversation, and I honor my husband in those ways, and I say, how can I continue to honor the fact that I have a life here physically, and you have transitioned into the spiritual realm, but I know we're still connected. And and especially with that, feeling that now I can recognize that I do have those powers in me, and the more that I just feed and grow and feed and grow on that.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So now you mentioned a little bit about how you found inspiration during this experience. And that's really the main top point of our topic here, is finding the inspiration. So I'd like to hear a little bit from you about what inspiration looks like, first of all, and how you found it. How did you tap into that inspiration, and how do you bring it forth in your life?
Well, I believe everyone has an intuitive nature inside, whether they are aware of it or not, but it's a little voice that's probably been whispering to you your whole life. And I won't get into specifics, but I have had a lot of death in that has crossed my path, starting at a very young age and maintained continuously through the death of my husband. And they have ranged in different ages and things like that. And each one of those, when I look back, I always stepped right into the role of being the supportive person, even to a perfect stranger whose son had just been in a rollover accident and had his arm amputated, and she was crying alone in the middle of the emergency room. And I walked up to her at 17 years old and embraced her in my arms and gave her a hug and told her it's going to be okay. And I was there for a whole other situation of an incident that happened to one of my loved ones. And so I started to realize in that moment that I no longer wanted to do what I've always been doing in my life. And I no longer wanted to be in that career field. And what am I going to do now? A lot of people, don't get mad, but in 2020, when the world shut down, we'll just say that, it was a blessing to me in the fact that it gave me a moment to sit still. I wasn't running around to 2 jobs trying to bring in income, and I wasn't, taking my kids to 3 different schools at 3 different times and all of that stuff. I could just sit quietly and think and try to figure out and get in touch with what I wanted to do. and began my healing practices and the toolbox of things that I now use and implement. And from there, I had like a little leaf of growth that I thought, this is good. And I connected in to like-minded people, both sides, spiritually and other widows. That was a huge community. And I just listened to every little nugget. And I tried a lot of things. I tried a lot of things because I didn't really, like I said, I didn't know before who I was as an individual. I thought, I want to be a wine girl. I want to hold this wine. I want to know what talons are and fruity and woodsy. And I want to know what all that means. So during the beginning of the pandemic, I ordered a wine club. And I had all these boxes of wine, and I got into like 2 or 3 different bottle types. I'm back to margaritas. I don't like it. I'm not a wine girl, but I would have not have known that had I not experienced it. I went on a road trip with my children all by myself. I didn't have my parents with me. And start experiencing life and trying on those different high-heeled shoes and stomp around in them like you own them. And with each new experience, whether you liked it or not, you start to rebuild your confidence. And when your confidence starts coming back, you start to anchor in more as who you are as a person. And then you start getting these little nudges of that inspiration of maybe I could open a bakery, or maybe I can go down and go to Peru. Maybe I'm going to go kiss that sloth in Costa Rica. What is it that you want to do? What is in your wildest dreams? My 11-year-old self wanted to be a dolphin trainer at SeaWorld, so like, why couldn't I? Why couldn't I do that? I mean, I'm not going to do that now. My needs and wants and soul purpose has changed, but that's where you kind of start is, what did I want to do back when I was young? And slowly working it. And you with shadow work, it's a lot of shadow work that comes up.
That's right. Absolutely. Yeah. I like what you were saying there about it's going to be okay. It reminds me of there's a meme I saw recently. I think it goes like this. I'm not sure if I'm going to get this right. It's all going to be okay in the end. If it's not okay, it's not the end. I kind of like that. I think, well, even if it is okay, it's not the end. But really, it's just kind of a good reminder that life provides all kinds of amazing experiences for us so that we can experience the truth of who we really are, so that we can come to that knowing deep down inside. And I mean, you don't necessarily have to have a particular experience in order to get to that knowing, but every experience that you do have in your life contributes to that knowing. And so you have the option of honoring and blessing the experience that happens and saying, thank you for bringing this to me, no matter how painful it might have been, because now I see myself through a new lens that I have not seen before. And now I'm able to accept parts of myself that maybe I put aside before because I was afraid to show them or something. That's really what I think our entire purpose on this planet is to become very, very clear about who we really are. And the universe will keep tossing experiences into your face as long as you still need to learn more about who you are. That's what I believe. So
I agree with that completely. A lot of people will say, oh, so are you saying, and take it not in the spirit of which it's given, but I have learned that even when one of my children is having a hardship, or I'm experiencing self-doubt, like, oh my goodness, am I doing the right thing? Should I just go back into this or that? And those fears start to come up and things like that. And I reflect on what it is that I have learned from my pain, from every painful experience. There was a lesson there. And what am I going to take from that? And I know that, we're kind of getting close, but I do want to say this, and this is so funny to say that my whole life mantra literally has changed to to a recent episode I watched of the Golden Girls while I was getting dressed a couple weeks ago. And Sophia Petrillo, the little old lady, they had a health scare. And everybody was running around scared of saying, from now on, I'm going to do this and I'm going to live my life like that. And she said that she's going to become a lawyer. And her daughter says to her, Mom, that'll make you 96. And she said, well, I'm going to be 96 anyways. And I just was like, oh my God, that's right. Don't ever think you're too old or you've moved past something,
Exactly.
because you're going to hit that age anyways. And if you don't, it doesn't matter then, I guess. But
that's right.
So just keep going for your goals and keep becoming and doing the things that you want to do. You're not too old to do that. And with the average age, by the way, in the country of a widow is 59 years old. And or no, 57. And 69% of widows are under 59. So, not even old enough to collect Social Security. So they're still working and they're still out there.
Right.
Right. So keep going and living, because we're here on earth. And yes, we can choose to get sucked into the muck of it, or we can look up and go, oh my God, those clouds are beautiful. And oh, the air smells great and it's raining or it's snowing or, whatever it is, and just embrace that and be present in that. And that's
exactly
very important.
Right. Being present. That's ultimately the goal, isn't it? So many of us live in the past. We have our stories about everything that's happened before. We tie ourselves to those stories. We kind of hang ourselves on them, if you know what I mean. We become so attached to the stories that we forget about just living who we are right now. And that's an easy thing for us to do, particularly as we get older. The older we get, the more stories we have and the more interesting we become, And the fact of the matter is, like you said, there's a whole life in front of you. You don't know how long it's going to be. Well, maybe you do. I don't know. But people say everything happens for a reason. And I say, yeah. And the reason is because I invited it somehow into my life. That's the reason. Whatever some people will say, well, I'm sure as hell not going to invite cancer into my life. No, maybe not directly. You're not wishing for cancer, but if you're feeding yourself unhealthy foods and feeding your mind unhealthy thoughts, you're creating an environment in which cancer can grow. So on a sense, you are inviting that cancer into your life. So we have to think very, very carefully about whatever shows up in our life. On some level, we chose for it to happen so that we could grow from it, so that we could get back to that truth of who we really are. That's what I believe. So I think we should be grateful for everything that happens, even the ugly, horrible, awful, nasty stuff that we really hate. On some level, we have to come back to gratitude, and we have to recognize that that thing has served us in some way. Anyway, Rachel, we're getting close to the end here, and I want to give you a chance to say some final words to people, especially words of encouragement and inspiration to those who might be suffering loss.
I want to, first of all, just validate that you are loved and supported. The universe has so many doors open for you, but when you are sitting in your grief, it's very difficult to see it. So I would invite you to reach out, even if it's like to me, and to say, hey, what's a good resource for this, or how do I find this? Because the support is the best way to start moving yourself forward in any capacity of what it is. To be able to link arms with people who can say, you know what, I'm going to reach back to help pull you forward, and I've got you. And to be able to have that kind of love continuously in your life is different than the love and support that you get from your own family group. And so I really would say that you're loved, you're supported. There are things that can help move you forward in this life, and embrace those, because you're going to be able to manage the bad things as you serve more gratitude in your life and understand that. And as you are looking to that gratitude, it does start to resonate in, okay, yes, with everything that I am thankful for, that gives me the strength a little more to understand the bad things that happen. And it's very empowering.
Yeah, beautiful. Thank you. Now, I believe you said you had a gift that you wanted to share with people. Do you have the link for that right here?
You called me out on that, and I don't have it, but you can go to the Wellness Universe. I have a free workshop through there, and it is the second Friday of every month. Through the second Friday of every month, you can visit me, and I have all kinds of links there, and we talk about different topics. This March 10th, we're going to be talking about dating and what that looks like. Are you ready for it? Is it something you want to do? It's creating an inspired life after loss with Rachel Vasquez. And also I have a YouTube channel, Living Beyond Grief, that has all kinds of great nuggets. I would love to connect with you there.
Okay, I just went over to the lounge and I found this link. I hope this is the one you're talking about.
Yes, it is. That's exactly. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. Yeah, so people, check that out. You can go and connect with Rachel for free with that program. Thank you so much for being here today, Rachel. It's been just an honor to have you and to share this space with you.
Thank you. I truly am honored and blessed for the opportunity to get out and talk to your audience. So I really appreciate it. And it's always a pleasure talking with you as well.
Oh, well, beautiful. Thank you so much for that. And so to all of you, while the loss of a loved one can be unbearably painful, it's possible to find relief and to heal. Sometimes all it takes is awareness and acceptance, but there's no reason for anyone to be paralyzed indefinitely. It may take time, and you may require some external support, and you've heard about some of that right here today. But in the end, if you give yourself a chance, you'll discover inspirational gifts in your grief recovery process. So I want to thank you all for watching today's program, and I'd like to remind you that you can catch the recordings of this and all other previous shows on my website at lifemasterytv.com. And friends, I invite you to remember to practice my life mastery mantra every day. It goes like this. I gratefully forgive the imperfect being I have been in the past. I gratefully accept the magnificent being I am right now. I gratefully welcome the evolved being I am becoming in each new moment. So until we meet again, I'm David McLeod, your Life Mastery Coach, wishing you love, light, and blessings on your continuing journey. We'll see you again next time on Life Mastery TV. Bye-bye.
Bye.